It's December 2021, and I talk with a disabled friend on the phone as I walk around the pond near my house. Her insurance, and she has the good insurance, cut her personal care attendant hours from 25 hours a week to 20 hours. She asks, what can she cut from her life? What if she only showers once a week? That will save 2 hours. And maybe she can go without laundry for 2 weeks at a time. It's depressing hearing her make these calculations. And if that weren't enough, her favorite PCA, personal care attendant, quit 2 weeks ago because she couldn't make ends meet on $15 an hour. And it's been hell trying to find a new person with a labor shortage. I feel devastated. I wonder a little if I know anyone who might be willing to be a personal care attendant. I asked several friends a few years ago who were looking for work, and no one was really interested. But I feel like I need to provide some amount of hope. So I tell her that the PCA union is starting a campaign to raise personal care attendant wages to $20 an hour. It will likely take a couple years, but it's something. When I finally get back to my house, I'm discouraged, and I check the mail. There's a letter in a heavy brown envelope. It's addressed to me. It's addressed from Eli, who is my friend's 10-year-old, but the handwriting looks surprisingly adult. What's also puzzling is that the postmark date is July 18th, 2060, and July 18th, 2060. July 18th, 2060? I am so confused. I open the letter. It says, Dear 2021 Shaya, I need you to know that everyone does not die. There is a future. In your time, they tell stories about how they created the end. They said the earth would flood, fires would consume everything, and massive wars would kill thousands. They were right about some things, but really wrong about others. I am writing from the future, from the era of interdependence. I know there was so much fear and confusion in the 2020s. My parents still use hand sanitizer after leaving a building. Still, I remember your steadfastness and how you projected the sense of acceptance that is necessary to weather big storms. Today, I went over to my neighbor Litsky's house in preparation for a storm. I nailed boards over their windows while they worked with my daughter on her Hebrew chanting. She worked out an exchange with Litsky, where she works as a personal care attendant in exchange for Hebrew lessons. I am so proud of her reaching out for help when she was struggling. And it's sweet that Litsky said yes when there are so many choices of personal care attendants to hire or barter with. I remember you convinced my mother to go with you to meet with her legislator about raising wages for personal care attendants. It was such a struggle for people during your time to give and accept help. And so much has changed since then. We breathe and take pauses and find stillness, and then make a plan to ask for help. We listen for what people most want to give, and we listen for what they most need. And we understand in a whole new and deeper way that giving and receiving is relationship. Relationship is giving and receiving. That's all it ever really was, but during capitalism, we got awkward about it. There was so much exploitation, so much taking unconsensually that we got afraid to ask, even when we had great need, and even when it would have given the other person joy to meet that need. The COVID-19 pandemic was a time of great change, great suffering and loss for sure, but also a time when many seeds were planted. It started with the mutual aid systems, which continued long after the pandemic. It started with the community fridges and the unionizing. It started when Congress decided the stimulus checks should come every month. It started every time someone else let their community know they needed help. We broke free of capitalism before it broke us. First, there were the labor shortages. No one wanted to work for so little money ever again. So they didn't. And the corporations had to pay more. The corporations had to advertise their benefit packages and how they treated their employees, the flexible schedules and accountability processes for when people in power behaved badly. And some people went back, but some people opted out. They bartered their skills with their neighbors. People grew mutual aid societies and committed to supporting each other. And people went into debt, but then we decided not to pay our debt. And the debt collectors didn't have a whole lot they could do about that. They had to rely on their own community's mutual aid funds and community fridges. Shaya, these times weren't easy, but they were just a little easier than what you're living through now. We learned from the stories of our ancestors and the indigenous elders who remembered how to have a relationship with the earth. We had to grow food. Monoculture farms were no longer an option. Disease after disease swept through. You had to be growing such a huge variety of plants to be left with something. We learned to not take more than we needed and to pick for those who couldn't harvest. We learned how to work with the land and not in spite of her. We learned about soil and nitrogen and how to water on really hot days so our plants wouldn't die. We learned that we could have a relationship with the earth too, giving and receiving, receiving and giving. We didn't always get to eat what we most wanted, but we did eat. We had to find new ways to dispose of waste. We started to understand that in our relationship with the earth, we didn't have to shrink. We had to listen and pay attention and give more than we took. Some of us held on too hard and too long to the belief that we would always be a scourge on the earth. It was a belief so deeply held that I think it'll take another generation, or maybe even two, before we can let it go. It was hard for us to believe that by planting and picking plants, we could support their growth. We learned to not be quite so self-centered in how we thought about the earth. We were not capable of destroying the earth. Anyone who comes upon a house that's been abandoned for 20 years can tell you that other beings will claim once human structures. No. What we were exploiting was the very ecosystems that could sustain us. We were upsetting our own ability to live on the earth and all of the species that were traveling at the same time as us. But the earth, she would keep turning, placid and impervious to our moralizing. I know everything seemed hopeless during your time, but things do get better. I wanted to tell you to keep going, that it will make a difference. Love, Eli.